Uh, good morning, everyone. I am Nate Stewart. I'm currently the Associate Vice President, Chief Operating Officer. I need an index card for my job title for the development and alumni engagement at Center College in Kentucky. In my past career, I was an athletic director, most recently at Carthage, and have been at Center for the last almost 3 months now. So I look forward to visiting with everyone today.
Natalie?
All right, I forgot the order, Miriam. Hey, everybody, I'm Natalie Winklefoos. I get to be the athletics director at Oberlin College and also have a giant title, which I'll spare you all from that because it would take the rest of the webinar. But I have been in this role since 2012.
And then Mike.
Yeah, thanks, guys. My name is Mike Lynch. I'm the athletic director here at Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. This is my 7th year here at Babson, and look forward to visiting with everybody today. Thanks, Miriam.
Of course. Well, thank you all again for being a part of the panel today. So I want to take us through a series of questions for, we'll start with kind of some beginner questions. So those who are kind of new to advancement and fundraising. Then we'll do a few questions that are about kind of those who are in the middle, and then maybe some advanced questions, because I think that will help us all at different stages here on this call. So the first question is for Natalie. For those who are interested in, and they're just getting started, can you talk about starting with relationships and how you build them with alumni, parents, and kind of all of those who you are engaged with?
Yeah, absolutely. I also just want to give a shout out to everyone on this call. I know this is that time of the year where we're fighting to get through, but we are almost there, people. We are almost there. So let's build a relationship together. Let's connect. Let's learn a little. Let's do some fun stuff. The people that, so we have been wildly successful in our fundraising efforts on our campus. And I think that the relationships that we have started that were most important for us were those on-campus partners, actually, and making sure that they understand our desire to be in this space, play a role in advancement in alumni affairs, and helping them understand that a fundraising win for athletics is a fundraising win for the institution. And with that, you have to know kind of what story are you telling about your space. I'm a firm believer that some of the most powerful people in the world are amazing storytellers because they can set a vision, they can establish values, they declare an agenda that honors the past, they create a path for the future. So what is the story that you're telling on your campus? What is it? What is the intentional kind of impact that you're trying to land with those alumni, with those parents? But before you do that, I would focus on the on-campus team. So when I'm thinking about that, the first person that I test a story out with is my staff, see if they like it, see if that's a priority we should be focused on. And then I roll it on up to my boss, who just happens to be the president. So after she gives me a thumbs up, which I typically get a thumbs up, we'll go to the VP of development, VP of finance. Those folks have to be key partners in the process. I'm fortunate that I have someone on my staff that focuses on the day-to-day logistics of fundraising. I'm fortunate that I have a liaison within the fundraising team. He's a major gift officer. And our coaches act as kind of those treasure hunters. They're not making asks. Typically, they're not particular parents, but they absolutely could be seated at the table if that is a fact. The relationship building has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. I also think it needs to be consistent. So making sure that you're telling a consistent story to the characters out there that you're casting it with. I have a Heisman Club board. This is our affinity, our booster club. The selection of those board members is huge. You have to find the folks that are really willing to lean in and give of themselves. I mean, they are not getting paid for this work. So a reminder of that, like this is free labor. They're doing it solely out of love. So building the relationship with them and keeping them fired up, like that's the key there. Parents, if you want to involve parents, great. They're awesome. Parents these days are used to paying to play. I think it's just finding those folks that are fair-minded. I could sit here and tell parent stories all day long. I won't, but I have backed out of the parent conversations. I don't want to have them anymore. There's too much access involved in there, but my staff member he has a much better temperament for parents than I do. So full transparency. But he has those conversations, and we have been able to really generate some really great success through parent involvement. It's important, when you're telling your story, yes, you're going to be doing some talking, but I think really the most important thing in relationship building is listening. So you're understanding, where they're coming from, meeting them where they're at, listening to where they are in their lives. Like, can they give? What kind of clues are they providing you in the conversation? So this will tell you if you're ready to push or if you need to pause. And then I think, with the stewardship piece of the question, your stewardship is just a way of saying thank you to people. It's the relationship building process that can occur when somebody makes a gift. But I think the main purpose of stewardship is to make sure that they come back. So thinking about sports, we have some incredible venues to say thank you. You can, gear, of course, yes, right? But you can provide them access to students. You can provide them access to coaches, locker rooms.
I thought the same thing. Like, what the hell? I thought you couldn't do that.
Exactly. I thought the same thing. But creating that genuine connection, this is the way that can make sure that they're a go-to philanthropic teammate kind of for life. And just make sure that you're saying thank you to everyone on campus that maybe helped you secure that gift. And I don't think thank you is a word that people on campus get to hear enough. I mean, working in higher ed these days is crazy. So, don't be afraid to throw gratitude around like confetti.
Thanks for that. Mike or Nate, anything to add as it relates to relationships or stewarding?
I would make it, Natalie, that's a ton of awesome information. The only thing I would add to that, and I tend to keep these relationships pretty simple. I try to be as honest and straightforward as I possibly can with everybody we come across. Try and develop a tie with those individual donors. I might go on, just as an example, I might go on a visit and suggest to the person that I'm speaking with that when I get back to the office, I'm going to make sure and send them something from Babson. We just did a partnership with New Balance. I'll send them a New Balance sweatshirt. I'll tell them I'll do that. Well, when I get back to the office, I need to make sure that I actually do it, because I'm trying to get them to trust me. I'm trying to create a link with that person so that when I walk out of the office, they don't think I'm full of crap, that they really want to listen to what I have to offer. And hopefully at some point we will engage later. That first conversation is never about donating. It's usually just about getting to know me and our program and trying to create a trusting relationship with the potential donor. So that's what I can add to this.
Yeah, I think Mike and Natalie said it well. The only thing I would say from a stewardship perspective too is don't forget the positive and the power of impact that your student athletes have. It's one thing for us to say thank you. It's one thing for your coaches to say thank you. But coming from a student athlete who they are actually supporting and linking the donor to be able to see the student athlete that they're supporting is more powerful than you can think. Actually, even at Center, we are starting to shift more away from long emails and words to videos and pictures. So I think that's an important piece of stewardship. And Natalie said it spot on. Stewardship is about getting them to come back so that they can make a tangible connection with who they are supporting. The odds that they're going to come back are much, much higher.
That's great. Thanks for that. So Nate, I'm going to go to you on this next question. Can you talk about the different types of fundraising? So we have annual fund, corporate partners, crowdfunding, special events. So what are all of these ways that we can engage in fundraising?
Yeah, Miriam, you kind of hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of different modes and methods and mediums that you can use to do that. And they all kind of work in conjunction with each other. Your annual fund is super important to support from a day-to-day perspective. Many of you have towns, or you're in bigger cities, you're in smaller towns, you're in different places. You have a lot of corporate relationships and corporate folks. Partly they want to support you and they want to support your student athletes, but they also want to use athletics as a medium to advertise as well too. So don't forget about that. You can build a corporate sponsorship portfolio, corporate sponsorship guide. Think about the different assets that you have, whether they're static signage, is it digital signage? Can you put their logo on the back of a ticket? And as we talked about before, stewardship's important in that too. So invite them to a game, make sure they can sit midcourt or sit at the 50-yard line in football, or take them up to the press box and make sure that they feel valued as a sponsor. I think you've seen a lot of giving challenges and a lot of competition amongst teams. I think that's another important area. You know, and at Center, we use a lot of the annual fund gifts and some of the gifts that come in from the day of giving to feed our major gift pipeline as well too. We had a parent from a sport who gave a large gift, several $1,000s in a giving day challenge, and now they have turned into a major donor. And we just put a big ask in front of them last week, and they kind of self-identify themselves through the annual fund and the day of giving as well too. You know, a lot of teams are fundraising for things on the side. You know, that could even be as simple as selling cookies or selling shirts or doing some of those other things. So that's an incorporated piece. I would say just be careful and make sure you're funneling everything through one person. The person who asks is so important, and what you ask for is so important. And you really, you know, Mike and Natalie talked about getting to the point of being able to listen and ask, and you really only get one time to make a first impression. So the coordination needs to be thought through as you coordinate all these different areas and all these different avenues. So, you know, happy to expand on that later, and happy to expand on that more if there's more questions about the different types, but that would just be, and then, you know, you would finish with major gift fundraising. Obviously, you know, every college, every university categorizes a major gift in a different amount. Oftentimes it's 25,000, it's 50,000. Are you doing that in a one-time gift? Can you stretch that over a multi-year pledge? There's endowment fundraising. So there's all kinds of different things we can get into, but happy to answer more questions on that later down the line if folks want to get into more detail.
Thanks for that. Mike or Natalie, anything to add?
I think Nate did a pretty good job of summarizing all of that. The only thing I would add is outside of philanthropy, certainly thinking about other ways to drive revenue for your campus. We do a lot of, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are doing the same thing, but we're doing a lot of rentals and bringing camps and clinics to campus and trying to incorporate convincing the folks on campus that those are important parts of what we do, and allowing that revenue to remain within the athletic department. We've been able to convince our folks that because of all the deferred maintenance needs we have within our athletic facilities here, that any revenue we generate outside of philanthropy be driven right to take care of those deferred maintenance issues here within athletics. So we're actually saving the campus some money if we can figure out ways to use our facilities to drive additional revenue. So that's another component. Again, we could talk about that later if anybody's interested in that, but that's totally different from philanthropy, but it is a way that we've been pretty successful in delivering additional dollars to our department that have helped us to maybe differentiate some of our programming.
That's great. Well, this next question is for you. And I think Natalie alluded to this earlier about helping others understand how athletics fits under the bigger picture of fundraising. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I have to admit, I'm very lucky here at Babson. I have the vice president for student affairs as a former athlete, the executive vice president for development as a former athlete. So I have two very important people here on campus that I collaborate with that actually want to see us be successful. So I think that has certainly been helpful for me. I don't have to convince them of the worth of athletics and how important it is for us to be able to raise money here, but they have colleagues, they have staff that may not necessarily understand where athletics fits into the bigger fundraising picture. I usually start with the amount of student athletes that are with the percentage of student athletes that we have here on campus. At Babson, we're about 25% of our undergraduate population, which eventually turns into 25% of our alumni population. So we have we drive a significant amount of participation. And that participation number, as everybody here should be aware of, is very helpful in determining school rankings, et cetera. So when I can say that raising money from athletes is an effective way to help the entire campus, that usually reverberates pretty loudly. We have a number of donors who would choose to give to athletics if they had the opportunity to. 10 years ago, Babson didn't do much in the area of athletic fundraising. I just looked back on our records just recently. We had, I think in 2012, we had 400 donors to athletics, and they were probably small $100 contributions that were coming in on their own without any outbound efforts, if you will. We're up over 2,000 donors now because we've made it a priority to make sure to allow people who are interested in giving to Babson to give to areas where they're passionate about. And a lot of our former student athletes want to give back to their programs. So I would encourage all of you to have that conversation with your VP or your president about the important stake that athletics plays on your campus as part of the overall student experience. The building that I'm in now houses our varsity athletic programs, but it's also a 300,000 square foot recreation center that almost our entire campus comes through on a daily basis. So it's pretty evident that it's an important piece of the overall undergraduate experience here at Babson.
Natalie or Nate, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could say, and I think all three of us could sit here and talk all day about this, but I do think that it is so critical in linking the institution to the institutional mission to the athletics mission. And, and getting yourself invited to other departmental meetings to share your priorities and help them understand, or offer to host their meetings in your space. So they can actually have the visual of, students walking around. They can see not just athletes, but your typical students using the recreational spaces. And so also linking kind of that, the typical campus, aside from varsity sports, but making sure they understand like athletics and sports are for everyone, right? It's why we have bleachers in our stadiums and arenas, right? So athletics, it's all of us. It's one team. So, I'm spending a lot of time talking about making sure that it's one Oberlin, that, we compete against Kenyon and Denison, all the time, right? I don't want to compete against Oberlin. So I'm trying to knock off the Oberlin versus Oberlin and like, let's do this together. So it's been helpful to really point out, the difficulties and challenges. And hopefully you have recipients on the other end that are actually hearing you.
Very well said. So I don't think I have anything to add.
Awesome. Well, this one's coming to you. So you're in advancement. So can you talk us through, the connection between athletics administrators and advancement? So maybe some tips and tricks, maybe if there's some challenges going on between the two. So what advice do you have for building the relationship with advancement and how it can be a great partnership?
Yeah, I wish I had a shortcut or a simplified version, but I think Natalie talked earlier about relationships, and I think relationships are important in this area more so than ever too. I mean, there's no substitute for a relationship. So, certainly I kind of wear both hats, having been in athletics and now in advancement. So you don't need to sell me on the power of athletics and the transformative nature and the work that you guys are doing as athletic directors and coaches, but someone who does not have an athletic background may need to have some backstory. So I would encourage you to reach out to your VPs for advancement, or if you have a liaison from the major gift team or whoever your partner is, to reach out and spend some time, invite them to lunch, walk around campus, invite them to a game, much like we were talking about stewarding donors earlier. Steward people on your campus, steward your VP, steward your president, other people, let them be able to see, because the picture's worth 1,000 words. I think most folks in advancement, especially on smaller campuses with small enrollments, and Mike said that student athletes there are about 25% of the population, and then they become 25% of the alumni base. Most folks have that same story to tell. So advancement officers are going to be creative. They want to be there. They want to be involved. Again, we're looking for participation, because that's a big piece of how we get evaluated, as much as total dollars for our alumni and parents, and parents councils are their different things and different ideas. I would push you to pitch ideas to your advancement staff too for fundraising. Showing up at events is huge too, because there's a buy-in there, right? So if there's an alumni event, or you're hosting something on campus, or something that you can be there and be around donors, I think that's important as well. I also think, I made the point earlier, but I want to reinforce this about making the ask. Not going rogue is a big way to gain trust too. So making sure every time you're going to make an ask, or you want to approach someone, you're clearing it with your development staff, and not because I think they're trying to tell you what you can and can't do, but if they're getting ready, if they, for example, have a major gift prospect that they're getting ready to ask for $50,000 for X, Y, or Z, it could even be for athletics, it could be for financial aid, it could be for whatever, but they're getting ready to ask a major gift prospect for something, and a gift officer has been working with this prospect, they're not going to want you to come in and ask them for $1,000 to sponsor the tip-off tournament, right? So just making, or they may say, no, we don't have anything in mind. That's a great ask. Go for it. Go ahead. So making sure that you're following the rules, and that you're working together, and that you're being collaborative and creative, I think is very important. And then just build a relationship, showing up. As much as you want folks to show up at athletic events, you need to show up at other events too, and make sure you're present and you're being being seen and working really hard to build relationships.
And just to add to that question from Mike and Natalie is coaches, right? Like, how are you engaging in coaches and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, the coaches are such a huge part of this, but one of the things that I don't do is I don't ask them to ask for money. I tend to use our coaches as friend raisers more than fundraisers. You know, they will, they are terrific contact points. They're fonts of information. They are wonderful ambassadors, but they're not, you know, this is not their full-time job. And unless I have real confidence in a coach that they can do all of the kind of walk all of the necessary steps of fundraising, including stewardship and kind of asking at the right time and being in the right place. I don't necessarily trust that my coaches can do that. So I handle most of the major gift work here. But coaches will help to inform me of where people are in the process. They'll educate me on which parents or which athletes that they used to have, which alumni that they have now are excited about their program. We'll put together, I ask all of our coaches to put together 4 to 5 ways on an annual basis that they can interact and involve their alumni population in their particular sport. We have a graph of 8 or 10 different ways they could do that. And every coach is expected to do at least 4 or 5 of those every year. We also include fundraising responsibilities in their evaluations at the end of the year, to be honest. I mean, it's something that's really important here. Again, I'm not asking them to ask for money, but I am asking them to be a part of the team and to understand that that's an important part of helping to bring their program to a higher level. A lot of the bigger work falls on my shoulders and on the advancement staff's shoulders, but we need information, and coaches sometimes can get to people that we can't get to. Just like there are sometimes when I can get to someone that my VP for advancement can't get to. It's kind of the nature of the business in athletics, is utilizing the people who are best positioned to reach out to that particular prospect to at least start the conversation. So that's how we use coaches here, and they've been very, very successful doing it that way. We do have an annual giving day that they take part in. They do a lot of outreach. They do a lot of follow up, but for the most part, I'm asking them to raise friends and to hand those folks off to me and to the advancement staff.
Natalie or Nate, anything to add?
Very similar to how Mike is operating. You know, the annual sit down with our head coaches to hear their stories of their wants and their needs for their program. And then that allows me to establish priorities and programmatic goals for the department. You know, and reminding them that you know, equity should always matter in this fundraising efforts. So making sure that it's not just the men's programs who typically have the stronger alumni that are coming back and giving back, making sure there is an understanding of how that is going to impact your department in regards to equity. You know, I'm simply empowering our coaches to be explorers, right? So they're testing stories sometimes for us. You know, if a project has some legs, you know, they're providing information to us about family habits, you know, where do they vacation, you know, what players aren't selling the raffle tickets and are just writing the check, and, you know, what kind of car are they showing up on campus? You know, are they bringing their whole team to the spring break destination? You know, I said earlier, I tend to avoid parents, but I'm also paying attention to what parents are consistently showing up at games. So we have a lot of West Coast kids, you know, so if there's a family from California that is showing up every single weekend, you know, that's telling me that there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, you know, I would just add to that. I know parents are a tricky dynamic, especially for a coach, especially when there's playing time on the line. And, you know, I know as athletic directors too, right? You're trying to keep parents at a distance because you need to keep parents at a distance for multitudes of reasons. And that's where I would encourage you to reach out. You know, it goes back to the relationship. Reach out to the advancement office, right? Now that I'm in advancement, I can talk to parents all day long because the playing time issue comes up. I just throw my hands up and say, you know, well, how about this? How's the rest of their center experience going? Or how are they enjoying their classes, right? I can pivot and change the conversation. And what we found, if we can engage parents in the first year, right? In the first year, our likelihood of getting a major gift out of a parent is much higher. If we wait till their son or daughter as a junior, we're in trouble. We're probably not getting much, but they want to impact the experience of their student. So if you have information, feel free to share. That's how you build credibility with the advancement office too, because we're going to continue to come back to the well. We can have conversations all day long with parents that take you guys out of awkward situations.
That's great. So I just have a couple of questions before I open it up. So if you have questions, you can feel free to send them directly to Josh Mujit. Sorry if I pronounced your last name incorrectly. You can send them to me or put them in the chat. But Natalie, I want to revisit your conversation or your point about the Heisman Club. So for those who are thinking about like boards and board creation, like how are they managed? Kind of how are they developed? What thoughts can you share about your Heisman Club?
Yeah, so Heisman Club consists of 32 board members. Most of them are alumni. We have one parent sitting on the board against my better judgment, but he's okay. We'll keep him around. Some of those folks are inactive just because they're past presidents or past executive board members. But we ask our board members to meet 3 times a year. Typically now because of the creation of Zoom, we don't have to worry about those all being in person or over a phone call. But we do ask them to show up in person during our homecoming weekend, and we'll do a lot of work around that. There's a virtual mid-year meeting and plus an executive board meeting that is in person. So it'll be the president, the vice president, treasurer, that kind of stuff, myself. We'll pick a location and we'll all meet up and kind of do a mid-year check and evaluation of where we are. And then we have our end of the year meeting, and that tends to be virtual as well. The president serves a 3-year term. The Heisman Club supports projects that benefit more than one team. The everyday management of that, it's a lot. There's always a question, and that's a good thing. When it's a lot, it's a good thing because it means you have people that are active and engaged and are curious and have questions and are thinking and, thinking about ways to help make the department better. But that typically comes from myself, my athletic staff member who handles the Heisman Club, and then our liaison. So between the 3 of us, we're kind of handling the day-to-day. We used to have committees set up within the Heisman Club board, but we kind of taken that away and have just kind of simplified the role of being a board member. And we ask them, provide us with their time, talent, and treasure. They're our brand ambassadors. They share information in their alumni circles. They're able to answer questions about what's happening on campus. So then that way it's not, we're not getting bogged down answering those kind of questions. They're kind of reacting to things before it even gets to us. So it's more of a proactive approach. They're the ones that are getting people excited. They talk with recruits, they host events wherever they're located. It used to be just a handful of dudes meeting over some donuts and talking about the good old days. And then I showed up. I don't know if they were happy about that, but I think they are now. But so the donuts still exist, but the old timey talk has gone away, and we focus on the future. Our giving day was Tuesday, and we're now at a point where our staff has to do very little to make that day a success. My role in that giving day was, I had about a list of 8 folks that I reached out to prior to giving day to get them set up. So I knew those gifts would roll in. I made a 1-minute video that was shared. I provided talking points to our Heisman Club board. They then went out and they each had their list of alums who they were going to contact. It was very little work for us to raise over, $350,000 in 24 hours. That's great. We're using the giving day. We pitch it as a game day for our alums, right? A game day that isn't going to hurt their knees or their backs, because they're getting old. I hope it hurts their wallet a little bit. That's the only thing I hope it hurts. The other thing we've implemented is a next generation board. So these are Heisman Club board members in training, and these are 5 to 8 young alums that are invited to meetings. They don't have voting rights, but their participation is strongly encouraged. But this is our way of just making sure the pipeline is always being filled. They're charged with giving us their time, talent, and treasure too. Not so much the treasure, but a lot of their time and talent. What happens is We do ask our next gen board member to host an event wherever they are. They're typically in one of our hotbeds. So New York, San Francisco, Boston, DC, all the major cities. But a board member will pay for them to host an event. So in San Francisco this spring, we have a next gen member that's going to host bowling, beers, and brunch. She's not paying anything for it, but a board member who lives out there is going to pay for it. He'll pop in, do a little song and dance for the alums, and then he rolls out, and it's the young alums' good time to have, bonding over their experience as student athletes at Oberlin. This also just creates a network for them. They're entering the real world. They're probably a little bit lost. And so it's providing an atmosphere for Oberlin to stay connected with each other. But that's been incredibly huge for us. But it is important, like I said earlier, to find the folks that are really going to give you time, talent, and or treasure.
Great, thanks. We've got a lot of great questions, so I'm going to start with those now. So one of the questions is, I'm wondering if CRM software, i.e. Salesforce, for building and tracking these donor relations revenue streams is part of the agenda today. So do you all have thoughts on whether you're using Salesforce or what type of software you're using?
We're transitioning to Salesforce, so I'm not all that familiar with it, but certainly some type of software system is. I mean, our Nate can probably talk more on the advancement side about how invaluable that is to researching, to prospecting, to keeping information in one place, to making sure that the information that you're giving out is correct. All of those things are obviously vital when you're trying to find out as much as you possibly can about an individual or a family, and then tracking them throughout their history as a donor or non-donor. All of that stuff is really, really valuable. I mean, I'm lucky here. I'm sure Natalie may have the same access. I mean, I have all that access from here into our advancement system. So if there's anything that I need to know, certainly checking off with our VP before I go to see somebody who's coded a particular way, who might be assigned to another major gift officer. But that information I can pull up at any time. My assistant can do the same thing. It's an invaluable tool that we use when we're considering approaching someone for some type of contribution.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on Mike. Again, this is where the relationship with your advancement office is going to be so helpful. Our folks in athletics at Center have access to our database, and so they can see things. We've even allowed them to segment some mailings to our athletic alumni, some of our athletic parents. Part of it's we don't necessarily have the manpower, and part of it is they have great ideas. So I don't want to get in their way. Go forward. But I think if you can build a relationship in the trust level and you can get access to the database, I think it's invaluable. We also ask them anytime they have a substantial conversation with a major gift prospect, we have a call report and we log it in our CRM to log it. And it's not so much for them to know, it's partly for everybody else to know, but we're also working on building the pipeline for the next 5 or 10 years. And who knows which staff member is going to be here with the history of the institutional knowledge. So if there's anything substantial, we try to document it, and all is in the CRM. I was an education major in undergrad, and I always remember this, that, your two best allies as a teacher are the custodian and the secretary in the office. At an advancement, your best person is who manages your database, because you're only as good as the information you have. So I make sure that, because I walk right by their office every morning on the way upstairs to my office, I make sure I stop by and say hello every day. So sometimes when I need something, they can move me to the front of the line, and they're great to build relationships with, because they see the transition of information go back and forth and across the line. So I would encourage you to stop and talk and say hello. Bring them donuts every once in a while too. It's amazing how far that goes.
Absolutely. So next question is about NIL. So can you discuss how NIL is starting to impact your work with fundraising? If it's becoming a hurdle, what are the things that you're doing to counter it?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have been watching that. It hasn't necessarily made its way here yet, at least in a substantive way. We do have a few athletes that are doing that are probably getting a couple of pieces of pizza from somebody down the street. But I do think that at some point in time, we are going to have, and it's probably going to be sooner rather than later, we are going to have to figure out means for providing some better support to our student athletes around that topic. We do a lot of education about it. We're not necessarily in the business of helping them to understand their deal points. I know there's, obviously NCAA regulations around that, but there is going to come a day, I believe, when more and more Division III athletes are going to have an opportunity to do something through NIL. It won't be the numbers that we're talking about in Division I, but certainly those pizza deals, or maybe an individual car deal at a place that has a football program in the middle of the country, that might be realistic. But as of right now, we're just simply educating them on what the rules are and asking them to alert us if they do get approached about some type of an NIL opportunity, and providing the appropriate education from there. But it hasn't really impacted our fundraising. I think it probably, at a place like Babson, we're a business school, I think it could probably differentiate us in some ways, because our if we were focusing on it a little bit, because our alumni are so passionate about our program. We have a lot of really successful people that probably would help us to build kind of an NIL pipeline, if you will, but it hasn't been a priority to date.
I think one of the other things that we've had to do in terms of an advancement staff, and even some of our major gift officers, is donor education. Our donors watch ESPN like everybody else does, and they read the newspaper and see what comes across the line. So they're seeing all these deals. So a lot of times I found people just have general questions about, hey, do you have anybody who's getting an NIL deal? What's this going to mean? Knock on wood, to this point, we've not had anybody say, hey, I want to give to this collective and not give my annual donation to the college. So I think that's part of some things you need to keep in mind too, in terms of educating donors. Because one of the things I hear all the time, well, this is not Division III athletics, or, we're being too competitive now, and some of those other things. So we have to have talking points, and I have to arm our major gift officers with talking points on what to say and how to educate donors. So I think that's probably going to be the first step before the NIL stuff itself opens up.
The next question I have is about equity. So how are you all maintaining equity as it relates to bigger teams, smaller teams, older teams, newer teams, men's teams, women's teams? How are you maintaining equity?
It's hard. Honestly, I mean, Natalie made reference to it earlier. I mean, our men's teams, we've had men's teams here at Babson for 80 years. Some of our women's teams started 20 years ago. This was primarily a men's college up until the 1970s. We are working really hard to try and ensure equity. One of the ways that we're doing that from a fundraising perspective is we have a couple of funds that are specifically set up for women's sports, and I try very hard to ensure that any money that I'm raising on the men's side, I'm also doing the same on the women's side. We have a brand new, on the issue of older team, younger team, older coach, younger coach. I've got a soccer coach who's been here 40 years that has, 5,000 alumni out there want to give to his program. I have a brand new swim coach who just got here. He's probably 25 years old. He was an assistant in Virginia, and now he's here doing this for the first time. So I'm trying to provide that coach a significant amount of support on the fundraising side. Probably recognizing that the soccer coach has a built-in advantage. So trying to educate and bring our younger coaches along, arming them with a lot more information, trying to provide them a lot more support from the development office's side, so that we can somehow try to balance those. But it is a major challenge. We have some big some alumni who are very, very interested in supporting our men's sports at a really high level. And that's awesome. But I've got to figure out a way to provide those same resources or similar resources to our women's programs. As an example, we had a gentleman who wanted to send one of our teams to California on a trip. It was going to cost $50,000 or so. And we took the gift. We allowed that team to make that trip. But on the flip side, I was out that same year gathering up the same amount of money so that I could send one of our women's teams someplace as well. They had talked to me about taking a trip to Chicago and spending 3 or 4 days in Chicago as a recruiting opportunity. They didn't have the resources to do it, so we went out and found those. But it takes work, and it takes you have to be dedicated to it. And I think it has to be really intentional work as well, because it's the reality is the men's teams are going to drive a heck of a lot more donations than most of our women's programs.
Yeah, I mean, Mike nailed that. It is hard and it has to be intentional. And I worry about it all the time, probably too much. But this is also why I ask our Heisman Club board to support projects that benefit more than just one program. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, a men's program that literally was just raining money. Like the parents were crazy and they're like, we want this, we want this, we want this. And it's like, this is awesome and wonderful. And I want all of that for you. However, you know, turn your heads to the right and you'll see, you know, this stadium and lack of, you know, XYZ. And so then it was an opportunity for me to talk to, you know, these potential donors about equity and in its importance. And then what happened was they're like, okay, well, how much is that going to be? Right? Share the number. And they did both, you know, so because they, you know, they really wanted what they wanted, but I also wanted what we needed. And so it really is just taking the time to have thoughtful conversations. And that's where these sit down conversations with the coaches are super beneficial and helping them understand, like, it is not personal. I don't hate your program. You know, I want things for you, but the impact, you know, and the domino effect. And then it's the education with the development staff as well. You know, they may not be aware of the importance of, you know, the things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day as an athletics administrator. So it is educating them on NIL. It's educating them about equity. It's making them walk through your facility spaces and understanding and really putting eyes on your struggles and challenges. And then it's just, it is constant and you repeat yourself often. And hopefully you start to hear that language repeated back to you. And that's when you know it's taking hold.
All right, so the next question is about balancing kind of departmental initiatives versus individual or team initiatives. So how are you managing or coming up with a priority list for the department?
So we do this kind of year to year. We have a list of long-term projects that we know are going to be, you know, more expensive than not. So those tend to be the major gift, you know, capital campaign projects. This is where those sit down conversations with coaches come through. You know, who knows, in those conversations you find out, because maybe coaches aren't talking to each other, that they want the same thing, right? So this is where you can, like, well, here's a win for everybody. And then you're taking care of kind of two programs at once. But it is making sure your priority list is an actual priority list and not just like you get attracted to something new and shiny. So, you know, it's kind of the needs list and then the wants list, and making sure that those needs are taken care of first. And sometimes there's some really inexpensive wants that just kind of are easy victories. I like doing those. Because it keeps that kind of philanthropic mindset and joy going. Sometimes for those major projects, it takes a long time to make them happen. So finding little victories along the way to let people know, like, this is happening. You know, we like to slap a Heisman Club logo on anything and everything that gets supported by that group, so that, you know, it starts a conversation even within our student athletes, like, what is the Heisman Club? Like, who are these people? You know, but it kind of starts that education of philanthropy. But again, just like the equity piece, I think that the priority list needs to be intentional and really thoughtful. Conversations with our VP of Finance, who also oversees, you know, the construction and, you know, the budget, clearly, you know, getting her buy-in and input on that list is also critical for success.
Awesome. So the next question I'm going to ask is about endowments. So with kind of inflation being a real concern on our budgets, how have endowments now been more of a focus? Or maybe talk a little bit about endowments, and then how do you manage fundraising for both endowments and annual goals?
It's a great question. Endowments are actually a priority of ours right now. I was going to add on to what Natalie was suggesting about in the most recent question, you know, tying your fundraising goals into your strategic plan. We just refreshed our plan, so it's going to stretch out another 3 or 4 years, but certainly we have some major fundraising goals we want to accomplish as part of the next 3 or 4 years here at Babson. So tying those two things together is helpful. Endowment fundraising is a big issue for us right now. We're trying really hard to endow a number of the coaching positions that we have. We did find that through COVID, thank goodness, we didn't have to cut any positions here, but certainly athletics was under a lot of duress during that time. I think a lot of people on campus probably saw the athletic program a little bit more expendable than anything else. We were able to fight those off, but it did inform a lot of our thinking about endowments and about how we can structure our endowed program to keep the possibilities of having our budgets reduced in any way, to kind of push that back. We've had the athletic director's position has been endowed. We're very close to endowing three or four of our head coaching positions. And for me, that provides that extra level of support, not only for that particular team, but a couple of those coaches that we have in those positions are older. And my hope is that I can use that endowed money is going to be budget enhancing. I think that's an important component of endowment work, is to make sure that your advancement office and your president are on board with those resources being enhancing and not budget reducing. Otherwise, I don't know why a donor would give to an endowment. But we've been able to convince our president and our board that those are budget enhancements, so that when my coach decides he's going to retire or she's going to retire, I'm going to have a significant nest egg there that'll allow me to go out and recruit and retain the best possible replacement for that person, rather than taking 10 steps backward and hiring a young person just out of college, and maybe someone who's got a few years of experience. I can really hire an experienced head coach to come in and take over programs that have been real stalwarts here at Babson over a long period of time. So they're really important pieces of what we're doing right now.
So there's another question about, can you talk about your experience with potential gifts that come your way and may not be a part of your campaign? Biggest need, but still can be helpful.
I can talk about that on a global perspective, right? I think donor intent is so important, and donor intent sometimes is a thing we miss on, right? I have a list, and even for general campus fundraising, right? We have 3 or 4 priorities we're working on right now, and we're constantly going back to our major gift officers and saying, no, these are what we need to be talking about, right? These are the priorities. These are what the board chair is coming back to us and saying, hey, we need to get done. However, I think donor intent is very impactful. You're going to get a much bigger gift from a donor if that's where they want it to go. I can talk, if I have a donor who wants to give to general use, but I'm trying to pivot them to endowments, I can talk all day long. They're not interested. They're not interested. I got to make sure that we steward the gift and we keep the gift coming. So sometimes bequests are another thing. Everyone, with plan giving, I don't know how much people are in plan giving, but plan giving all the time, we're pleasantly surprised, thankfully, more often than not, with some bequests that come in, and they may be for something that we didn't even know was out there. A lot of people we know were in their estate plans, but a lot of people we don't know were in their estate plans. So sometimes we just have to take the gift and steward it the best we can and pivot as it comes down. But I think that's where it goes back to listening to donors and seeing what donors are interested in, and then trying to match the need with the donor intent and seeing if there's something that can be accomplished there.
I'm going to go back to the endowment question and maybe take us back to step 1. So step 1 is we want an endowment, right? So now what? What is the fundraising goal, right? How do you go about that? So can you talk a little bit more about that as it relates to endowments?
I think Nate's probably going to probably support this, but every institution is going to have probably a different level of what those endowments start at. At Babson, we can endow. We typically endow our head coaching positions at $1 million, but we'll start an endowment at $100,000. So it'll start to pay off income if we can get it to $100,000, and that's when it'll start to pay the department back. As far as what it's going to do to enhance the program, if it comes for a specific, so we have both head coaching endowments and program endowments. So if someone wants to come in and support the women's soccer team as a whole, they'll probably they'll contribute to our program endowment. If they're interested in the head coaching position, it'll go specifically to that head coach, to that slot. And then we do have an overall departmental endowment as well that helps to support all of our programs. We supplement that with we have what I call the Athletics Excellence Fund here at Babson. That's our general departmental support fund that has both annual income that goes in there, as well as an endowment that supports our general departmental needs.
Awesome. So the next question is, do your campuses require you to give a certain percentage of each gift to athletics back to the college in order for the rest of the gift to be considered budget enhancing for athletics? A similar concept, or is there a certain threshold you need to hit each year that is budget relieving before you can start bringing in budget enhancing dollars?
I think that is probably a case by case basis, a campus by campus basis. You know, I know some people, you know, this happens a little bit more probably when you get into public institutions with foundations who have to offset operating costs and some other things. You know, 20% goes to the foundation, 80% goes back to the program. I can just speak for what I know at Center. You know, again, this comes back to the power of donor intent. If a donor wants to give $1,000 to women's soccer, we're going to give all $1,000 to women's soccer. We're not going to start splitting it into all different types of accounts, again, because we want to steward that gift. And hopefully if they give us $1,000, we could go back next time and ask for $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it ends up. But I think a lot of that is probably case by case basis. The board of trustees are setting different policies in terms of what needs to go into what the balance needs to be to fully endow something, what the naming opportunities are for different campuses, you know, how the different things flow. So I really think that's a case by case basis.
All right, well, I think we've got time maybe for one more question. We'll see if another one pops in. So for this can be certainly for anyone. What are the new things on the horizon as it relates to fundraising? And how are you continuing to grow in the area of fundraising?
Well, I don't know if it's new, but certainly crowdfunding has gotten a lot more popular in terms of driving participation and trying to allow as many alumni or friends or parents or whatever as possible to contribute to your program. You know, the dawn of social media and trying to take full advantage of every opportunity we can there. I think those are areas that are they're going to continue to grow, and I think they're going to continue to grow even faster. But, you know, I still go back to, and I would imagine that Nate and Natalie are with me on this. I mean, the most impactful contributions that I have received, either through my work here at Boston University or wherever I was at, have been through those face-to-face conversations, those individual relationships that you developed with people who have who you know, you're able to tie their passion with your purpose. You know, and those typically take a long time to build. Those aren't, very rarely do I have somebody walk in my office and tell me they're going to cut me a check for $1 million. But I would say a number of times over the course of my career, those relationships have built over time. And although I'm not seeing a check every time I'm visiting someone, at the end of the day, when you end up with a $2 million endowment, over a 5-year period of a relationship, those are the really impactful gifts that move the needle. So as much as all of these, you know, all of the new stuff helps, I think it all comes down to individual personal relationships and developing trust with people and getting people excited about your product and tying together, you know, the passion they have for whatever program it is, and having something available to give to. I think that's probably the most important part of this work.
Anything else, Red?
I would just add that, you know, I think the challenge in fundraising right now is there are so many competing interests, and you know, the people that are philanthropically have that kind of mindset. They're helpers, right? And so they want to help a lot of different causes. And let's be honest, the world's pretty messed up right now. And so it's hard for me sometimes to push somebody to give a gift to athletics when, you know, they want to make a gift to what's hot on my mind is gun control, right? So I want their money to go there rather than, you know, a bucket of balls. So I think there is there is something about just being really mindful and really listening to people and what's really stirring their emotions and where their heart is. But, you know, you can also kind of peel that back to making sure they're staying connected to the student athletes and making sure that they're having those conversations with those students that want to go out there and make the world a better, more kinder place.
Thanks for that. So I'm going to go ahead. There's one more question that popped into the chat. Before we do that, if you all could click into this link and fill out a survey on the webinar, that'd be greatly appreciated. You'll also get one following the survey, but might as well do it now. So last question for you all before we wrap up is about naming rights. So can you talk about naming rights, how you all go about that, and as it relates to new facility projects?
Well, those are significant, could be significant differentiators. There are a couple of different ways that we've utilized or we've tried to take advantage of the opportunity to name a new facility. Certainly an alumnus is probably the most direct way, but there are partner companies out there now that will help you to put your facility project together with companies out there that might be interested in doing so. Certainly in Division I, that happens quite often. I've seen it happen in Division III, depending on where the facility is located. So there is help you can get with that. But certainly those higher end individual donors who have been longstanding contributors, or, to be honest, people like to see their name in lights. And if you have a donor out there who's really interested in having his or her their name up on a wall, those are the types of people you want to be talking to. Where our facility here is named after a gentleman who has been a long supporter of our program, but who, also at the end of the day really wanted his name in lights. And over a long period of time, we were able to kind of figure that out. So it can go a lot of different directions, but certainly those are really, really impactful contributions. I mean, $10 million does a lot for your department.
Nate, anything to add to that? All good?
Yeah, no, I would just add, I think this comes back to where you're working hand in hand with your development advancement office. If it's a significant naming right, certainly the president is going to be involved. It's going to be someone who's raised their hand and expressed an interest. And, again, I think I've worked on 7 campuses. All 7 have different policies as it pertains to naming rights and namespaces. So I think the more you can work with your advancement office on this, the better you're going to put yourself in long term.
Awesome. Well, I just want to again thank you, Natalie, Mike, and Nate, for your time and nuggets of wisdom. It's certainly been helpful for me, so I hope that it's been helpful for everyone else who's joined us on the call. Again, the recording will come out, the survey will come out if you haven't completed it today, but thank you all. Have a great weekend. And go to the rest of your, go teams.